inspiring and really thoughtful analysis of what's been happening and linking it to concepts of revolution and protest. I guess one of the things that has happened to most of us is actually we all have a real interest now in reading up about ideas of revolution. I think it's like one of these concepts that's really has become important. We want to understand what's happening. All right, so we have 15 minutes for discussion, and I have a question here, and I think I can have a question there. 3 questions. All right, so we'll start with questions. And I'm thinking we can start with a couple of questions, and then you can respond. Okay, so first question.
First, I'd like to thank it was really interesting and it was balance between the theoretical ideas and analyzing the real world. So it was good. Using Hannah Arendt, you mentioned her, there is a distinction between the work of historian and the work of political analysis. Historians will focus on the first stage of a revolution, especially this is that burning period. And she mentioned that the second stage or the second step is analyzing what's going on to build that constitution, as if she was talking about the Egyptian revolution. I think your paper is important in Arabic culture. It should be translated because I noticed that in Arabic readings, most of the writings are focusing on the first stage of the revolution, describing the Utopia of Tahrir Square. We need to strengthen the body of writings that trying to move us from describing to analyzing. Another thing, first, I think you need, this paper needs to reconsider some of the terms that you've used. You said that we've transferred from military regime to Muslim brother regime or something like that. I think what has transferred is the top of the regime, but the regime itself is the same. So saying that we are in an Islamic regime is not, accurate. Thank you again.
So,
thanks very much for a comprehensive and received presentation of what's been happening. I want to stop at 2 concepts you mentioned. I want to stop at domination by exclusion. And of course, we can cite various examples of authoritarian discourses, attempts at exclusion. Nubians, Sinai Bedouins, women, Copts are only examples. My question is, you also critique the polarization of activists, and again, this is something that's been concerning me a lot. There's Ahli and Zamalek, Tahrir, Abbasiyya, Maspero, anti-Maspero, revolutionaries and non-revolutionaries, absolutely. However, my question is, imposing agents on the ground in terms of authoritarian and revolutionary, aren't we replicating the same binary? And given the fact that both powers exist on the ground, that we share the same space, that this is a country we're both going to stay in, hopefully, are there strategies of going around this binarism? And just, I'm not really opposing what you said, but I'm I'm confused myself about it. This is one question. The other one, very, very briefly, discourse analyzing you. You said something like 3 times that you are not promoting the hate culture, that you are not being prescriptive about what is utopian, what is dystopian, and you used some other term, I cannot remember now, but it was 3 times, and I want to know where that is coming from. Why are you so apologetic?
Okay, sorry. Dr. Rashid, you're psychoanalyzing.
Not quite.
Yeah, Mary, thank you very much for this interesting talk. I liked the framework, the theoretical framework that you used to analyze the utopian and dystopian aspects of the square. And well, I agree with Walid, and my question is, I mean, the idea of extreme polarization. So in order not to reproduce this polarization, I was just wondering, why did you select eminence and transcendence from Deleuze and Guattari? Because simply you could have selected the revolutionary machine and desiring machine, and this would have solved the problem that Walid posed. And these are, again, Deleuzian concepts with which he analyzed, you know, all the neuroses and paranoid. So I'm just interested to know why selecting eminence and transcendence instead of those. Thank you.
Right. Well, I first congratulate May for an excellent performance, and I just want to add something. I won't be long because Walid said a part of the things I wanted to say. I would like to speak about Tahrir Square as a utopian space, as a metaphor, but also as a symbol of Egyptian revolution, which is not only in Tahrir Square. The millions that get out in the streets since the first day shows that there was the beginning of the revolution. And what I wanted to add to your excellent quotations, two important quotations of the Egyptian revolution, الثورة مستمرة, the revolution continues, and الشعب يريد, the people wants. Do we really know what the people wants? I happen to go outside Cairo a lot, and I see how the people understand everything. Our real problem is the terrible misery of our people, and I think, talking of revolution, it could seem trivial to speak of poverty, but poverty exists and is there, and we can see everything. The poverty of education system, which has to be reformed from A to B, and all this, what Ashcroft yesterday defined as dominating representation. That's what we live in. And I think that this dichotomy between liberals and Islamists is true in a way, but is a sort of domination of representation who wants to close us in this. And there is a work to do, like you said. It's really very inspiring lesson of the conference. But there's a work to do, every one of us in this domain. And I believe in that.
Now that things have been unfolding for almost 2 years, and looking back in retrospect, do you ever get the feeling that what you're going through, that the struggle was trilateral and not bilateral to start with? Trilateral. And that what we're going through now was premeditated by pre-25th of January. I have that very strong feeling about things going on that have been going on ever since the 25th of January.
Thank you. I think, okay, so I take this question, and that's it. So 3 questions and we stop. So please.
Okay. Thank you for the most fascinating presentation. The first question is, what did you exactly mean by becoming modern? And why do I have the feeling that you haven't really stressed the third part of your presentation, which is your utopian? You didn't, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And there is another question that I always ask myself, and I'm not posing you for you to answer now. Maybe you can think of it later on. It's the question that I ask myself whenever we talk about the revolution, and I recall all the history study that I do with my kids. The question is, what is really, really wrong with the Egyptians? Why we do not have one revolution that actually succeeds and goes into the target? And the third, I have a little comment that I always thought of Utopia as an ongoing process towards a place that doesn't really exist and keeps changing in the process of going there. So somehow, at least I know that the Egyptian uprising or the Egyptian revolution at least we regained the streets. I mean, we reoccupied that public space in the streets. So it's a step forward. I need to believe that sometimes. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Over there.
I have two questions. The first question concerning the gender politics of dystopian strategies. You said that part of dystopia is wiping out the memory, and part of the wiping out was through the pretext of mingling and moral depravity and moral depravity that it escaped with the presence of women. This is number one. Number two, from the onset of the revolution, I'm interested about the gender politics. Was really gender politics? They are politics. I have a big question mark concerning the desire for the liberation of gender as well, even among the liberals. I'm not exempting the liberals from that charge.
Thank you. And last question.
I hope I can make myself clear. The question is something where part of it being a dystopia. Is it being a utopia as in self-sufficient, that everything was there, as you said, with this, very famous map. You have a village, you have food, you have water, you have clothes, you have everything. I come from Alexandria, and there is this distinction that there was not a square, there was no center. There were marshes all over the city from the east and from the west. And it could be, in your own living room, and the demonstration was right there, and we were, chanting, people join us, and people were actually joining. But if people are in the center in their utopia, how can there a Helena in London? Because we are in their own utopia.
Thank you. All right, so thank you very much. Very howly.
I'm sorry about that, but you responded to one another somehow. The first stages of revolution and the relation with constitution move from describing to analyzing. I totally agree with you, and I will be working a little bit more on this. I'm not a utopianist, obviously, but I start being, interested in this field of research, and therefore I will definitely produce maybe a little bit more, analyze a little bit more, and avoid dichotomies. I'm trying to avoid dichotomies. I was trying to avoid dichotomies as an academic, but then as an intellectual positioning myself within this fight, this big struggle between different parties which are completely polarized. I have to assert a certain position as well, and my position is actually the one that Edward Said would take when he talks about the intellectual position being always against power. Either this power is political or religious or economic or whatever form of power we need as intellectuals to fight against it. And this is why I was a little bit harsh in my positions and presented sometimes few things here and there in some sort of dichotomy. But the major dichotomy for me was authoritarian versus libertarian. You see, so here those are two positions, and within the authoritarian you might find different shades. The hegemonic is not the negotiated if we follow Stewart Hall, for instance. Those are two different positions within the authoritarian sort of utopia. I would like to work a little bit more on some of the concepts. For instance, domination by exclusion. I'm very interested because I also, in some other writings, I was very critical to nationalist ideologies, and basically because of the idea of exclusion. But I think that any form of hegemonic discourse functions by exclusion and not by inclusion. So this needs to be maybe a little bit more emphasized in my work. Revolutionary machine, becoming revolutionary, and the designing machine, you're totally right. I use them in other articles and so on. Those are concepts that I found a little bit maybe far from the positionality I wanted to address in this particular paper. I wanted to really work within cultural studies in a way, and within the Deleuzian realm would be to criticize the state as such, the structure of the state, and so on. And this is why I thought the treatise of nomadology will be very functional in this perspective, but also because, like you said, the last question, because Midan al-Tahrir, or the Liberation Square, was never really closed. It's people keep moving in the periphery, but also in different other neighborhoods, coming from neighborhoods with marshes and so on, and in different cities around Cairo. And this is why there is a nomadic citizen here that one can talk about whenever we talk about the opposition to the state, whether this state was under the Mubarak's regime or under the Muslim Brothers regime. Tahrir as a utopia, definitely. Thank you so much, Amina, for mentioning this and for encouraging me. Actually, you're my hero, as usual. It's a symbol, and I think of it as a symbol, and this is why I opposed, for instance, changing the name of Tahrir into Midan al-Shuhada and so on. This is completely understandable. The fight is definitely over representation, and I had few discussions that I had to sacrifice when I was writing the paper about this idea of representation, so I might come back to it when I expand it for publishing. So definitely, and I totally agree with what was said yesterday in Bill Ashcroft's presentation. So we are fighting over representation, but I want to remind also those who fought for a different form of representation, that we're working within the urban environment most of the time. And the Constitution itself is an urban product. It's not at all something that we are going to, yes, of course there will be a referendum, but those who will write it, the 100 person who are striving to write the Constitution now, they do not represent the workers, they do not represent the peasants. They have a certain type of representation that I would call representation of power once again. They have the power to be in this committee and to write the Constitution in the name of all. So representation here will be the representation in terms of art, but also representing the real, but also representation in the political sense, in the sense that we delegate them somehow. So this is why it's very important to work along or around the concept of representation, and I will definitely try to do so. Totally agree with you. It's a trilateral struggle, and I think I mentioned that SCAF and the Muslim Brothers, for instance, because they are the most organized groups that one can talk about. They represent together what I can call the hegemonic and negotiated positions. And the third party will be the oppositional position with all the shades and light and different colors that one can talk about within the revolutionary groups. I'm not also essentializing or generalizing the idea of revolutionary group. I'm trying to just work with those categories and overcome them somehow. So it's really spread everywhere. What in Deleuzian terms it would be lines of flight or lines of resistance, and this is a rhizome. It's not really something that one can definitely polarize. You polarize somehow, sometimes, in order to assert a political position. But this is not my real wish. My wish is to look at those differences here and look at the web as a web, rather than looking at Muslim Brothers versus the whole Egyptians, for instance. This will be completely stupid. So I'm not doing this, but I try to assert my position, for instance, in Dawla Madaniya, to call for Dawla Madaniya against a certain discourse, against a certain representation of who we are as Egyptians, as in against the Islamic Caliphate, for instance, الدولة الإسلامية الرشيدة. This comes from the statutes of the Muslim Brothers, right? Their own constitution. Becoming me then is something that I wanted to invent just to equate or redefine becoming revolutionary. So for me, it's I'm coining a new concept, but it's, you know, like just from the playful point of view, I thought it's nice. What's wrong? Everything is wrong. Everything is wrong. We're in total decline, and we don't face it. We do not recognize the fact that this is a tragic moment in the history of this country, and we need to get together and fight together and never lose hope. So Tahrir Square was a utopian community in the sense, to answer the last question, in the sense that you can find in the United States, for instance. So groups who are created as utopias and following a certain value system and a certain number of rules and norms and so on, but definitely not as a closed space, not as a striated space, if I use Deleuze's words, but rather as a center where different other centers will join somehow, or j'essaie d'utiliser centripède et centrifuge, so center from which you start or center to which you come, you know? So definitely I'm not thinking of this community as being a closed community, but the image that we have seen of Tahrir most of the time would represent it in a utopian sense and discard actually many of the other forms of struggle that took place in other parts of the city. Gender politics, I'm totally maybe I should leave the question to Dr. Hoda Elsadda, because she's much more, you know, into issues of gender and so on. But I want just to mention something. The first parliament that we had 6 women represented in this parliament, over 500 and something members of the parliament. This tells you something about our gender politics under the new regime. One of them decided to also call for rules, new laws, and so on against women. So I don't see gender as being completely utopianized again or idealized, because women can be very cruel against women, depending on their ideology. I mean, the ideology comes prior to gender in this case. Okay, all right. Can I show some images of this? This is my logo. So any of you who go on Facebook and see this,
no,
this
me too. It's not only.
But yeah. So the secret is I created it, and then it was online. Madaniya. This is the website that I created in March 2011, calling for civil state. We contributed to the discussion of who should be our next president and so on. And you can see also, of course, Muqati'un in here, because I was among the very, very, very few people who decided at the second round not to vote for Shafiq and not to vote for you know, some of our ads and so on, and on the ground, so very narcissistic. The last image, الثورة مستمرة, and you can see الثورة مستمرة, the revolution continues. The danger is what? This is the word danger in Arabic written on the wall. The danger is scarf and the logo of the Muslim Brothers. Thank you so much.